We had a little theater across the street that we just packed them in. We packed that little old thing full every Friday and Saturday because we had a jackpot. And everybody would come, sign their name when they went in, sit down, and then between shows, they would have a drawing.
I have a large family, and the first time that we ever went, that I remember going to that theater, was probably to see some religious film that our dad took us to.
My earliest memory is my dad took me, my sisters, and myself to the theater, and I was probably 5 or 6. And I was absolutely terrified of movies because I thought they were real. And the movie was about a shipwreck, people trying to get in lifeboats. And I think we all had to go home because I just started crying. But then my next good memory of the theater was I got over that fear, and it was a Saturday adventure. We got to go to the the cowboy movies on Saturday.
I was actually one of 4, and me being the youngest. Lewis being my oldest brother, who actually started out in the old theater and moved to the new theater when it was built. And my next brother, Tom, who actually worked in the new theater, and Charles, who actually worked at Siler City.
And I happened to be the oldest of the 4. We were like stair steps. Was born a little over a year apart. There's a year and a week between me and Ron, and a year and 2 months between Ron and Jerry, and a year and 3 or 4 months between Jerry and my sister. So I think they looked at us because there was 3 of us. So if I needed to be off for something, either Ron or Jerry fill in for me.
I remember as a small child the lollipops being a nickel a piece, but they lasted through the whole movie and then beyond, enough to take home with you. You always had fountain drinks, which were really special, not something that you got to do very often.
Spent quite some time there from, I call it bottom to top. From changing signs, popping popcorn, helping clean up, to running the movie.
Miss Laughlin sold tickets. The Bear Girls, there was several of those. Virginia Bear sold tickets. Verl Bear sold tickets. And Patty Bear sold tickets. There was about 3 or 4. So she'd find families where there was 2 or 3 girls or 2 or 3 guys, and that way they had somebody to fall back on if somebody got sick or whatever.
I do remember at one point a group of teenage kids driving up in this old, nicely restored car with almost like a mobster type car with doors that open backwards, and a whole group of them falling out of this car right there in front of the movie theater. And getting to see that was really cool.
A negative side of the movies, especially when it came to Westerns back then, I kind of knew what was going to go on. These were the same movie sets, the same scenes. They can't go out and make a total new scene for every movie.
The war was ending. Things were getting more that we could get them. She decided that she wanted to build a new building for the people of Liberty. They've been in that old little thing for so long. So she did. And it went on well, and then when it got ready for us to move in, we were going to have a big opening. We had the theater people from Charlotte and all around to come, and we had the first showing that night.
A lot of kids went to the movies, and the matinee on Saturday afternoon was sort of like a babysitting service, because the mothers would drop them off. But Miss Curtis used to walk the aisles, and if anybody got a little bit rowdy, she'd get on them, so they knew that was coming on. I guess I worked there for 4 years or so, but I enjoyed the whole time I worked there. They were 2 wonderful people to work with. And when I graduated from high school, I already knew I didn't want to go to college. And so I went to work at Liberty Hosier Mill. and then Uncle Sam needed my help.
I guess the most interesting thing of popping popcorn to me was you had to roll a machine out front, but you had to plug in inside. I was plugging it in, was thunder and lightning, and we were not going to put it out front. And as I was plugging it in, we had kind of a lightning bolt, and it knocked me off of the stool that I was standing on to plug it in. I'll never forget that because the metal off the plug ran down my arm. Had a burn place for a while.
It was just something we look forward to every Saturday. It cost 9 cents to go to the movie. So you took a dime and you had a penny left. I can see myself standing in front of the theater waiting to go up and buy my ticket with my sisters and other friends, because it's like all the kids in Liberty seem to go to the movies on Saturday.
They did have on weekends 7 and 9 o'clock shows. So even if I worked my little part-time job there in town, I could still get off and get to the theater for one of those shows. I could even do Sunday night church things and still get to the theater by 7 o'clock. So it was a focal point of my life during those teenage years and dating and just group activities with teenagers. I can't even remember cost. I do remember the tiny little ticket booth right on the corner of the building, right on the corner of the street. But it didn't seem excessive when you had a little part-time job in a grocery store. The cost to get in a movie didn't seem excessive.
And we love the cowboy movies, Hopalong Cassidy, The Lone Ranger. And there was one cowboy star named Lash LaRue, and he actually came to the theater and was on the stage. Now, my cousin absolutely loved Lash LaRue. When he actually came live and was on the stage there in the theater, I did not go because he was not one of my favorites. But I can remember her just going crazy that Lash LaRue was coming to Liberty. Our family went to and belonged to the Methodist Church. When they tore down our old sanctuary to build a new one, our church used the theater for Sunday services. Now, going back to that 1 penny left over when you bought your ticket, on Sunday mornings, we would have Sunday school at the educational building at the church, which was right close to the theater. And then we would walk over to the theater for church. We'd get there early, and then I remember just going because the theater was dark during the movies and you couldn't see, but they had the lights up when we came in for church, going over the floor looking for pennies. And I'm not kidding you, one Sunday morning I found 4 or 5 pennies, and I thought I had hit the jackpot.
And we were one of the first, in fact, I guess we were the first, to have a cry room. And it had, of course, the big window there for you to see the screen. You could hear if you was nursing your baby. And instead of asking people to take their children out when they were loud, you just said, take them to the cry room. In 1929, Daddy built uptown the little theater. He ran it on Friday and Saturday, and then things got really pretty bad, and he closed. And then in 1935, I remember that date, my daddy died, and we had 2 families. He was married the first time, and his wife died 31 years old with childbirth. Then he married my mother and had me and my brother. And then when Daddy died in 35, my mother says, I've either got to get in there and save what we've got or give it up. And she had helped him when he needed help, but never worked for him. She just walked right out of the kitchen and out and did all these things, and she just did a beautiful job. She died in October. I moved her out to my house in the country in September, and she died in October. and she would have been 100 if she had lived till December. Back during the war, they always had all kinds of news reels and what the boys were and where they were fighting and all that stuff. My neighbor was at the show one night, and all of a sudden she came flying back to the ticket office. This was in the old theater during World War II. And she said, I saw my brother, I saw my brother. They had not heard from him in a long time, and they were unloading a truck of prisoners of war, and he was one of them. Well, Margaret Martin was his sister, and she was just beside herself. And my mother told her, says, Margaret, after the show is over tonight, we will run that over and let you see it. And it showed it real good. They were, he was coming off the back of the truck, and he had some kind of box in his hand, and they took the box from him and pushed him on away. But they were taking him to a Japanese prison camp. He was a prisoner of war. Margaret went to Greensboro on Elam Avenue, got her mother and her brother, and brought them, and they ran that film over and over and over. He got home. He did get home. See, in a little town, you get things done like that because people help people. You can't do that in a big place. Now, what are you going to do with all this? I'm getting good.